You're listening to Flower City Sports on 89.1 The Point. Now your hosts, Liam Hoffmann and Aiden Locke.
Hello and welcome to the Flower City Sports Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Aiden Locke, with me, my co-host and good friend, Liam Hoffmann. Liam, how are we doing today?
I'm good. I'm happy. It's a little bit of a different format for us, but, I mean, it's about time we got around to it. It's an exciting time, end of February. I mean, we're really in the thick of this, the back end of this regular season now.
Yeah, for those listening live on 89.1 The Point right now, we are recording video for the first time, so our Spotify viewers can see our pretty faces, I guess.
Yeah, it's just a natural next step for us, and it's just exciting. We'll later in the show visually you'll be able to see Seth Appert and all your favorite Amerks and new Hall of Famer Rory Fitzpatrick on your screen as well. So yeah, exciting stuff.
A lot to get into this week, but before we break down the recent Amerks schemes, we talked about this at the end of the show last week, kind of teasing it a little bit, but it's time to have a long Devin Levi discussion, because man, oh man, is this situation interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we saw him a couple short stints earlier this year in Rochester, but with the recent emergence of UPL as a premier, really playing like a premier NHL goalie, and a recent skid for the Buffalo Sabres, which has, not formally, but it looks like playoffs are a bleak possibility for them at this point. And so it sort of feels like, and I mean, we could be proven wrong by this tomorrow, it's hard to say, but it seems like maybe Devin Levi is here to stay with the Amerks. And recently, in what's been his longest stint here without back and forth to Buffalo, he's just been elite, playing at a level amongst the AHL's best.
Yeah, it's not looking good for Buffalo right now. They're sitting 27, 28, and 4, good for 58 points. They're well out of the wild card race, have a lot of ground to make up if they're going to catch the likes of the Tampa Bay Lightning and Detroit Red Wings. And like you said, an extended stay now for Devin Levi. He's been getting plenty of ice time. He's been facing plenty of shots, which we'll get into when we really start breaking him down. But the situation fascinates me with how they're going to manage it between him and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And when this all kind of starts with when Levi arrived at the end of last year. Because what that did was it burned a year of his entry-level deal for 7 games. Buffalo got 7 games out of him, burned an entire year of his entry-level contract. So now that just shrinks the window that they have with him to, number one, see what he's got, and number 2, to have that cheap control of him. Yes, when he comes off of that entry-level deal, he'll be an RFA. They'll still have their rights. They'll be able to restrict the negotiations in free agency. So it's, yeah. But his play has just been exceptional as of late. Not so much last night, but in general, over the past couple of weeks, he's been outstanding.
Yeah, he started 11 of the last 14 games for the Amerks, which, dating back to earlier in the season, we didn't really see, maybe Dustin Tokarski for the very early portion once he came back from that initial training camp injury, but it hasn't been really consistent night in, night out, a clear-cut number one goalie for this team before Levi. We saw it a little bit with Eric Comrie, but nonetheless, in 11 games, his first 11 games, 6-3, 2-2, 2.53 goals against average, and a 9.26 save percentage. I mean, those are just numbers that you can't really ask for much more from him. But unfortunately, he's been dealing with lackluster, not good enough offense on the other end.
Yeah, I'm looking at slightly different numbers, a 2.6 and a 9.24, probably after factoring in last night's game. So, like I said, it wasn't the best night. He allowed 4 goals and saved 28 of 32 shots faced. It was just a bad night for the team, but we'll get into that a little bit later in the show. But Levi had a stretch where he made 125 saves in 3 games. That is a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, when I got the AHL app notification at the end of, it was one of the road games recently, and it said that Devin Levi had whatever it was, 52 or 53 saves, I thought, okay, that's a typo. That just can't be right, but it absolutely is. I mean, he's been having nights where he just goes 60 minutes and looks lights out the entire way, whereas that's just not something you're getting out of everybody.
Yeah, and so while we're on this goalie conversation, Dustin Tokarski got called up today, actually. So, it's going to be Levi and Cooley until Ticker comes back down. And I'm kind of glad to see Buffalo doing that. You have this veteran goaltender who's, an AHL legend and all that, top 10 in wins.
And played a lot of NHL games.
And he's an experienced guy. You may as well get him up there, let him be the backup or, a pitch hitter here and there, while you're leaning on Luukkonen for when either Luukkonen or Comrie are not available. So it makes a lot of sense to just give Levi all these minutes in the AHL because he was struggling when he was up in Buffalo. We've already talked about that, so I don't want to dwell on his stats in the NHL too much. But he has been, for the most part, lights out, off night here and there. But
like with anybody.
Exactly, and you're going to get those off games. But the reason why this is so interesting is because what do you do with UPL? He breaks out this year. He's been lights out. We talked about that, his numbers in depth last week. He's been one of the emergers in goal across the league this year, and they have to sign him. And they've already handed out a lot of big-time money. They're still paying Jeff Skinner $9 million a year. They're paying Tage Thompson a big boy contract. Dylan Cousins getting that $7 million contract kicking in this year. You have Owen Power, who's going to get that big-time money starting next year. And Rasmus Dahlin's getting basically a 200% pay increase going into next year from $6 million to $11 million per year. So those guys are starting to get big-time money as well. And I think this is going to boil down to what is UPL looking for. If you can get him on, a 2 or 3 year kind of bridge deal, probably that would look more like a 2-year deal, I would think. He's 24. I believe they'd still have his RFA rights at the end of a 2-year deal, and he'd probably get $5-6 million, and then you see what he can do, and you kind of go back and forth 1A, 1B with Levi, while you still have him under contract for an additional year, and evaluate from there. Do you want to go with Levi as the number one going into the future? Do you want to stick with UPL as the number one going into the future? It's going to be a very interesting battle to see how it plays out over the next couple of years, because Levi, after this year, it's going to be the last year of that entry-level deal, and you got to think back to when Buffalo brought him over from Northwestern. They just threw away that year of his entry-level deal, and, I mean, he was dominant at Northwestern, Devin Levi, that is. 2021-22 season, he went 21-10-1 with a .952 save percentage, to 154 goals against average, won the national award for best goaltender, and then followed that up the following year, winning that same award again in the 22-23 season, went 17-12-5 with a .933 save percentage and a .224 goals against average. He was lights out for his 2 years starting at Northwestern, and he goes to Buffalo last year, shows a lot of good flashes, comes in, is the number 2 this year. In 20 games played in Buffalo, 9-7-2 and 3-3-0 and an 8-9-1. It's not good.
Yeah, just quickly, it's Northeastern, not Northwestern for Levi. Just Aiden slightly misspoke. Yeah, no big deal
on that one.
But, I mean, the other side of this is with the play that UPL has shown, I mean, somebody else is probably going to be willing to throw a bag at him too. And, I mean, it's no secret that what Aiden mentioned, the Sabres are dealing with what's a difficult cap situation. Teams around the league know that as well. And so if they throw enough at UPL, the Sabres just may not be able to justify matching said deal. And the other interesting thing is, Levi coming into the year, in a lot of people's eyes, viewers of this team, followers of this team, Levi was to be the one, and then UPL was still a bit of a question mark that you hope you can get something out of. And then that story sort of wound up flipping. And so, yeah, the early season struggles, and then Levi now getting a chance to play in the AHL, which is just, it's slightly slower, and it just, the play speed required slightly slower. You're not facing as, quality of shots and things like that. And so I think it's good for his development, but yeah, it's hard to say what decision you make. And then, do you think about 2 years down the line, if say next year in the NHL, they do retain UPL on what's something similar to Aiden said, like a 2-year deal or something like that. And then you got both of those guys in the AHL, and Levi winds up being the 2, and say he's a great 2. And that's an elite pair across the league. Well, who's to say that then Levi doesn't get another big bag thrown at him by another team and then leave and emerge as a 1? It's tough decisions. I mean, it's a good problem to have if you're the Sabres, but it doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, and it's tough, but it helps them knowing that they have the RFA rights so they can match any contract proposed, and if Levi in a couple of years or UPL this offseason decide to accept, a hypothetical, obviously, offer elsewhere, if Buffalo doesn't want to match that, say the price is too high, they're going to get scaling draft pick compensation accordingly. So if someone throws $8 million at UPL thinking he's going to be a franchise goaltender, don't quote me, I believe that's a first-round pick plus change that they would get back for that contract. So that's another thing with that delicate balance is teams are going to have that in mind, and they're not going to throw, crazy amounts of money at these guys, especially someone who's really proven himself for a year in UPL of really quality goaltender play, at least statistically, that, you can't sacrifice that type of draft capital knowing that you could work out a sign-and trade with Buffalo, hypothetically, for probably a much cheaper price in terms of, compensation going back the other way. And obviously the terms would be agreed ahead of time with X player, because this could be not just for UPL, but for any player. So, yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I was Kevin Adams here with the situation. I think you got to retain UPL it's somehow, some way, and try to, not have to pay up entirely. If you can work out some sort of bridge deal for him, I think that would be the best way to go about it. Because, again, it's still like, we see this all the time with goaltenders. Someone can break out 1 year, be awesome, be unbelievable, a Vezina candidate, if you will, and then not saying that UPL is necessarily at that level yet, but then the next year they come in and their stats drop, they fall off, maybe the team plays a little bit worse, whatever the case may be, and now you're stuck there with a massive contract, especially if it's a long-term type of deal. Like, I'll use the Sergei Bobrovsky example. Florida gave him a long-term, very expensive deal, and he stunk for a couple of years. Was really bad. But now he's bounced back, and he's been playing much better as of the past couple of years. Obviously, they were just in the Cup final last year with Bobrovsky. That guy's a playoff performer, but we're not here to talk about the Florida Panthers, and I know it's probably a sensitive topic for the Sabres fans. I know what Sam Reinhart's doing over there. So, but yeah, no, it's just so hard with goalies in general because it takes them 5-6 years to really hit that stride, develop, and become quality NHL players. And then when it's time to pay up, you got to hesitate because you don't know if, especially in a case like UPL, you're getting this one good year of play, one really quality season. Is that going to sustain over, the course of a 5 or 6 year contract? And if that doesn't happen and he regresses back to somewhat more of a median, then you're stuck with a bad contract that you're not going to be able to get rid of unless you pay to get rid of it in terms of, giving up picks. So Levi, it'd be a tricky situation for him. Obviously, he wants to be in the NHL. He's been in the NHL this year, but I'm sure he's having a decent time. I don't want to say dominating, but he's playing at a very high level in the AHL. And, not that the Amerks have been winning a bunch of games lately, but he's definitely been an instrumental part of their success over, the past few weeks that he's been down there. And, I mean, everybody loves him. Head coach Seth Appert has nothing but good things to say about him in terms of his work ethic and all that stuff. So do you have anything else you kind of want to touch up on in this goaltender conversation? Yeah,
just shortly. I mean, you talk about it's not exactly the dream scenario for Levi, but every time we have had the chance to talk to him post-game or whatever it is, he has been really upbeat about the situation, and I think he's cognizant of the bit of arc he's went on and how it was he rode a really, really high in his 7 games last year and then descended to what was a pretty low to start this year. And I think just being able to hang out in the AHL and sort of level out and build a comfort level with less pressure on him is just going to pay dividends. But, I mean, surely he's still waiting on that call to go back to Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be? Anybody, even like Tyson Jost, who spent, a few weeks down,
Eric Comrie had this attitude.
Exactly. Like, there's numerous examples, and it's a tough one for sure if you're Devin Levi, and you're just hoping, for that chance to come sooner than later. So Levi's stats in those 7 games, while we're on the topic, he went 5-2, so they were winning games when he was in goal when he got to the team. He had a .905 save percentage and a .294, which, those aren't, mind-blowing statistics, but they were certainly better than UPL in 33 games from last year. He went 17-11 with 4 overtime losses and had an .892 and a .361. So, but then UPL comes in this year. He's playing really well. We'll pull up UPL stats for this year. He's dropped a little bit lately, but that's mostly due to the team struggling. His save percentage still above 900. His goals against has now gone up over 3, but he's at a .902 and a .303. But he's shown a lot of good things this year, and he had a stretch where he had some really good goaltender play. But past couple of weeks, Sabres have been struggling a little bit, and these kind of things happen. So
I think it's sort of a similar situation between the two players right now versus UPL in the NHL versus Levi in the AHL. They're both playing at a high level, and despite the team's lack of success, it's very rare that you come out of a game and one of those guys is who you want to blame. And the last point I want to make about UPL, and Aiden said earlier, the idea of, well, what if you pay him and then next year he's not the same guy? I think, and this happens across all sports, oftentimes a guy will break out in a contract year. You see it all the time. And then the next year maybe they take a slight step back or a bigger step back. But the other thing that goes into that, and I'd say particularly with goalies, is like teams are going to have a whole offseason to figure UPL out a little bit, watch his tendencies, learn his play style, and then figure out things you can exploit. And then I think, the elite of the elite players are able to, after that first setback, they get all the eyes on them and the focus is turned to them and maybe their play steps back a little bit. But the elite of the elite guys can then ascend back out of that and show that, yes, they are for real. And, despite them being viewed as one of the premier players on a given team, still be able to show out against the highest competition. And so, it's just going to be really, really interesting to see. And there's just, the reason we're having this discussion is because there's just no obvious answer. There's no prediction that either of us have that, there's any real merit behind. It's hard to say. Time will tell.
Yeah, and like with that, when you're evaluating goalies just at all, at any level, the play in front of them, drives so much of that statistical value in terms of, how many quality looks are you facing on any given night, and just sheerly the shot load you're facing, because that obviously has the biggest effect on, that save percentage is, a goalie who's facing 40 shots a night, like Levi sometimes is with the Amerks, his save percentage is going to look a whole lot better than a goalie who's facing 25 shots a night. So if you face 40 shots, you allow 3 goals in, you're still well over 900 there in terms of that save percentage. And then if you're facing 25 shots a night, you let in 3 goals, you're going to be into the 800s there. It's just simple math on that one. It's kind of self-explanatory, but
which is why you need to watch the games and not just look at the numbers at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's the best way to put it there when evaluating the goaltenders. So, I'm very interested to see how this is going to shake out. Towards the trade deadline, which is next week, we're going to be talking about that more in depth next week in terms of the trade deadline. Because once some of these moves come in, deadline is Friday, March 8th. So we'll see what kind of moves the Sabres might make. So time is ticking on that one. We haven't really talked too much about it over the past couple of weeks, but it's something that we've been building up towards and keep it in the back pocket so we can really talk about that in depth, next week, and then obviously the week after when, the dust has settled on that, we can look and evaluate some of these moves, because with Buffalo, probably going to be selling, so we're going to see how much change comes in Rochester with that. So obviously all those things impact one another. So
we're not in love with speculation. Just looking at rumors online can come out of anywhere. But next week we're going to take some more time to just discuss different possibilities.
And anything that would have obviously happened between now and next week. So
for sure.
We're going to transition now into our next segment, talking about these past 3 games that have been played since last week's episode, starting with a Friday night game on February 23rd against the Belleville Senators. You were there. You want to dive into that one?
Yeah. Before we get into the game itself, we'll start with what was the brighter part of the night. Rory Fitzpatrick was inducted into the Amerks Hall of Fame, was a Amerks captain for some time, and is the first Rochester Amerks Hall of Famer who was actually born in the area. Born and raised in Irondequoit, New York, just outside of the city of Rochester, and he served in Irondequoit politics post-career, so he's well known. And it was just a really special night for him and for past Amerks Hall of Famers. So what we'll start with now is video from the presser we had with him that I was able to participate in just before the game. So we're sending it over to that now.
Getting inducted as an Amerks Hall of Famer in a town you grew up in and idolized the team you're going in with, what does this moment mean?
It's special. It's an emotional night for us as a family. You know, just having been raised here, been an Amerks fan for so long, and you know, I keep telling people when I was growing up, you wanted to be a Rochester American. We didn't have tons of access to the NHL, and you know, the names that I remember growing up were always Amerks.
Who are some of those names? I mean, what are your earliest memories of the Rochester Americans?
So it would have been Jordy Robertson, Jacques Cloutier, Val James, you know, obviously a little later in the 80s, Gates Orlando and Jody Gage. But the first memories are, you know, Jordy, Jacques Cloutier, and Val James are the names that stick out the most.
You're the first one from Rochester, though, out of the 68. That's got to be that's got to be pretty special for you.
Yeah, it is. You know, obviously, you know, there's been a lot of great players come out of Rochester. You know, they haven't had the luxury of playing for the Rochester Americans, so that's to my advantage, I guess, today. So, but you know, obviously, you know, Rochester's had a lot of success with players coming out of here in the last few years.
How nice was it? I mean, you had to leave when you were 16, whatever it was, to go play junior, and then, you know, you're wherever and, you know, across the country playing. How nice was it to come home, you know, at some point in the career?
It was really nice. And, you know, the first time I came back here, you know, it was come back here and play for the Rochester Americans until I retired. And, you know, I fell into a good situation with Buffalo and was able to recapture my NHL career. But when I signed here in 2001, I had you know, my daughter, and I had one on the way. So, you know, the intention at that point was to play here as long as I can and you know, create that home. But coming home after playing away for so long, you know, was fantastic. Obviously, we didn't have the communication avenues that they have today. So, you know, once a week phone calls for many, many years was, you know, the way I communicated with back home. So coming back home was a thrill.
Do you ever think back to Game 7 in Carolina?
No. You know, I don't. I concentrate on Game 6.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you know, obviously, you know, there's you know, mistakes happen, and you know, I would have loved to. Had the team been in a better situation as a whole. I mean, the amount of defensemen we lost, and but I think if you look back at it, to get to Game 7 is a heck of an accomplishment. And you know, as Lindy told me after the playoffs, I went from 7th D to 2nd D, and you know, that's not a great position for a player to be in that situation.
How frustrating was that year? I mean, you were so close. Everyone kind of thought that you guys were going to go to the Cup and maybe even win it.
Yeah, so you know, it was frustrating, but at the same sense, nobody thought of that in December or January. Nobody thought that. So that team, I think we were coming out of the lockout. Rules had changed. You know, we were a benefit of that with some of the players that we had. Brian Campbell blossomed, Derek Roy, and Jason Palmenville benefited from those new rules. So, you know, I don't think the expectation, probably even going into playoffs, was to be a Stanley Cup contender. And, you know, I don't think that started to really become a vision until we beat Ottawa in Game 5.
Do you have a favorite memory from your time here?
I do. Actually, it's, you know, as a player, my first game here was shortly after 9/11. It was a full barn, and, you know, flag was draped through the whole ice, and it was just a very surreal time. You know, the crowd was very into it. You know, as an arena, you felt, you know, part of something special. So, you know, I think that, you know, that game, my first game here, was definitely one of the more memorable ones.
You could say your formal playing career started here as a junior Amerks. So what would that teenage version of you say about this moment right now?
It's unbelievable. As a teenager, you hope and you have these, wild dreams. But, to have played in the NHL and then to be able to come home and play for my hometown team is beyond anything imaginable in my teenage years. So, I obviously worked towards that goal, but never would have dreamt that as a teenager.
You think?
What was more unimaginable, playing in the NHL or running as a politician?
Well, yeah, I envisioned myself as an NHL player. I never envisioned myself as a politician. So I'd like to say public servant better than politician. So I think I have as much hatred for politicians as anybody else, and I was one of them. So, it was a driving force behind me doing it, quite frankly, is to, try to get someone in there that, from a different background and a different reason for doing it. And, my reason is I was a lifelong Roanoke resident and, cared about the community and wanted to manage it better than I thought it was being managed.
If you remember, what led to you playing defense instead of some other position?
That's a great question. I think it was our Squirt major season. My dad was the coach. We had a pretty good set of forwards, and we needed to fill a spot at defense, and who better than the coach's son to have to go back there and play. And that's really the story of it. And like I said, we had a great team. We needed a defenseman, and instead of getting an argument with another parent, why not put your own kid back there? And I guess you can't argue with that now.
You're a Rochester native, and when you were here playing, you're four-time McCulloch Trophy winner for the community service you did here. So talk about what you do now, but how much did it mean to you then to be a part of the community that shaped who you are?
Yeah, so being a part of the community, obviously, that you're born and raised in is easy. You want to be part of the good things, and obviously you get a lot of requests to do things, and I didn't say no too often. So it just came naturally, and we did it obviously in other cities, but coming to your hometown and being able to interact with people that you see on a daily basis and have known made that part of it very easy.
Do you miss hockey?
I do. Game day and payday probably are the two favorite. But, I was very lucky to have kids that all played. I've spent almost every weekend this winter at a hockey rink watching my kids play. So parts of it, I'm still involved. I feel lucky that my kids took up this sport and have been successful at it, and it's also allowed me to extend that love for the game by just doing something a little bit different. I coached them, and now I just get to enjoy watching them play.
What's it like to go from not just playing for your hometown team, but wearing a letter, being the captain for this team? What did that mean?
Yeah, I think that was just another candle on the cake, so to say. I being 34 and 35, it kind of came naturally when the rest of the team is, and they're below 25. So, but it meant a lot. I was captain and assistant captain at a lot of the teams I played for. But again, it goes back to, seeing some of the great captains that were here as in the history of the Rochester Americans, and being able to add that to my resume was a bonus.
And welcome back to the Flower City Sports Podcast. I'm Liam Hoffmann, joined by my wonderful co-host, Aiden Locke. Now, you just heard that audio from Rory Fitzpatrick. Now, let's dive into the game itself. So this was a low-scoring one. We've heard Seth Appert say throughout this year, you can't win a game. It's really, really hard to win a game scoring a goal or two, and that proved to be true.
Fun fact, when we get to that Syracuse game, he had a very similar thing to say last night as we are recording this on the Thursday. So it's been a theme over the past couple of weeks, huh?
Yeah, so in this Friday night contest with Belleville, now, by the way, Rochester will be in Belleville this weekend playing the Senators both tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday, so to look forward to. But Dustin Tokarski started in net for the Amerks as Levi got the back half of the weekend. But Tokarski had a great night. maybe the best I've seen out of him all year. And like I said earlier in the episode, he was playing a lot to start the year, but 32 saves on 33 shots faced for the boy. You really can't ask for anything more. And that was in 65 minutes of ice time with the overtime period.
Got to be part of the reason he got that call up today.
Yeah, totally. Wound up allowing 2 of 4 goals in the shootout. So the first 3 shootout shots, the first ones were made. Kizikov for the Amerks made the first one, and then the next 2 were made, so it went to sudden death. And then the fourth shot by Belleville was surrendered by Tokarski, leading to the loss. The Senators started with Mads Søgaard in goal, and then he suffered an injury early in the second period, and so Kevin Mandolese came in off the bench cold and really played lights out. Both of the goalies did a good job. So the first goal of the night was scored by none other than Mason Jobst. It feels like he's...
Did he score that on Søgaard or on...
It was against Søgaard.
Yeah, I figured.
It was like just before the injury. And so Jobst scores that one. Michael Mersch set at the blue line. What was a brilliant pick without interfering. I texted Aiden, and if you're an NBA fan, I said that was a Clint Capella level pick. So basically what happened was Jobst was skating along what was the far boards from me in the press box, and right at the blue line, Mersch just came from, I think it may have been off the bench, and just sort of inadvertently got in the way of the Belleville defender that was guarding Mason Jobst, and then Jobst was able to skate around the back of the net and just tuck one in that bottom right corner.
Little pick and roll action, never hurt anybody.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet to watch. And then that was the only scoring for a long while. Like I said, it's tough to win a game scoring only 1 goal, because at some point, it's going to break, and then sure enough, with just over 3 minutes left in the game, Zach McEwen from Belleville was able to score. Rochester was only able to muster 2 shots on goal in the third period, which is just really, really brutal when you're trying to put a game away. They were playing shorthanded.
And that's something that they've been struggling with recently over the past month or so, is just putting games away. They start fast, they get a lead early, and then they just disappear by the third period.
Mm-hmm. Riley Stillman was at the end of the second with like 11 seconds left. Fight broke out, and so he left the game, actually. I'm not sure that he was ejected because he wound up back on the bench. He went in the locker room. It was a bit of a weird situation we didn't really get clarity on. But exited for roughing, and then the penalty wound up being served by Lucas Rasek. So that started off the beginning of the third period shorthanded for the Amerks, just not really playing offense. And then Michael Mersch winds up being called for tripping about halfway through. And so it just really was not ideal for them. The tie was broken, like I said, with 3 minutes left. Overtime, Brandon Byro on a power play in overtime had a really, really nice one-timer chance that was saved by Mandolese, sure enough. And then, like I said earlier, in the shootout, Kizikov was the only shootout scorer for the Amerks. And just like that, it's another one-night win, another one-night point for the Amerks, which, I mean, you're happy about the point, but it's tough because they're in a stretch right now where they're playing so much North Division hockey that you get 1 point, but the other teams that you're, in a tight race with walk out with 2. And sure enough, the Amerks are now in 5th place in that North Division.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's an impressive performance from Mandolese there for Belleville, coming off the bench, shutting out the Amerks, getting the shootout win. So, moving on now to that Hershey game. We're gonna gloss over, because obviously in Hershey we were not there. It was a 2-1 overtime loss for the Amerks. So I think just getting the point against Hershey is the biggest victory of the week. You play a team that good, that tight, and Isak Rosen scores in that one, and it's an impressive outing as Hershey sitting on top of the league right now, 85 points, 41-9-0 in 3. The team is a machine, and we hint at it every other week, it seems, just how automatic they are. And being able to go on the road against Hershey and get a point after we reflect back to that game in December where, didn't exactly go their way.
Only
The
nine
4-2 loss.
regulation losses by Hershey at this point in the year is just unbelievable. That's crazy stuff.
Defending champions remain the team to beat, so they got a good program over there, and they are a really good team. So just getting a point out of that, can't be too disappointed, going into their building, number one, scoring first, like we see the Amerks do constantly. But again, still want to be able to finish a game, especially against a team of that caliber. You get that early lead, but you only get the one goal. The offense kind of gone missing lately. So transitioning out to this Syracuse game on Wednesday, I was there, a 5-2 loss against the Syracuse Crunch, and guess what? It was a 2-goal lead for Rochester in the second period, and then they get scored on 4 consecutively. I won't count the empty netter. Really, it was a 4-2 game. Well, I mentioned it. That empty netter was kind of ridiculous. It was just flung from, off the boards and center ice, just backhand scoop, and it just found its way in. It was an impressive empty netter, to say the least. Not your conventional empty net goal, but you start with a 2-0 lead against the Syracuse team. You got to put it away. That's the third time in a row against the Syracuse team where they score the first 2 goals and lose. And also, Rochester is yet to beat Syracuse in Blue Cross Arena. The Crunch are 5-0 in Blue Cross this season. It's just, these weird stats have just been surrounding this team all year. They continue to lead the league with shorthanded goals allowed. They are now up to 11. That was the real backbreaker, was that shorthanded goal that gave or extended the lead for Syracuse to 4. Or
Which
not
is just,
to 4, but to give them their 4th goal to extend it to a 2-goal lead. Apologies for any confusion there, but Levi was in goal. Not his best night, but you need a little bit more offensive production than that. I think just the way Seth Appert talked about this game afterwards kind of, put the best description of how this recent stretch of play has been and kind of how last night went for them. So I think I'll let him do some more talking on this before I ramble on too much about this game. So we're going to hear from head coach Seth Appert after the game last night right now.
Playing Syracuse in the way that these leads have gone out, I guess the last 3 games against them, what is hard about putting them away when you have that advantage?
Best defensive team in the league.
Did you see anything change after the merge goal? In the rest of the game?
No. We had chances to put it away. We had power plays. We hit 2 posts. Beersy had them beat on a power play that would have put us up 3-0, hit the knob of the stick. You need that 3rd goal. They're going to score. You're not going to. It's hard to win 1-0 or 2-1. I mean, they're a really good team, and this is an extremely deep lineup with now the best forward in the American Hockey League back in their lineup. So you got to find a way to get the 3, and that's been the issue of the last 3 games against them. We've played well, we've started well, we've given ourselves enough looks. Not as many as we'd like. They're a great defensive team. It's hard to create. They're a big, heavy, old team, but we had looks to get to 3 throughout the second half of that game, and we didn't capitalize.
You talked this morning about shots, and you weren't in love with the volume coming toward your goal. What did you see tonight?
They didn't have a ton. I mean, it was a lot of perimeter stuff. Yeah, I think they only had 30.
What do you guys, I guess, have to do to quickly flip the page now and get on the road in Belleville, especially what they did here in this building a week ago?
We're playing the same team. Belleville and Syracuse are almost mirrors of each other with maybe, take out Barbelet. Belleville's excellent team, really, really deep lineup, extremely old, heavy, physical, 8 veterans on it. Syracuse is just heavier and stronger and better than us right now. And we got to change that. And our younger guys got to decide to change that. Last year, they were better than us at this time last year as well. And we decided we wanted to change it. But we have to decide that, there's a high price to pay to score goals against teams like Belleville and Syracuse, a very high price. And you got to be willing to pay it.
They just don't quit, Syracuse.
They're just a really good defensive team that is old, strong, heavy, physical. And then we've got some good centers out of our lineup right now. that hurt us in the faceoff circle. I think we were 30% in the faceoff circle tonight. So that's not a recipe for success against a team as possession heavy as they are, because then they can just kind of lean on you and grind on you. And obviously the winning goal is a faceoff goal.
What's the difference in Isaac offensively, at least these last two?
What's that?
The difference in him offensively these last two. Is there any difference, or are they just putting the puck in?
No difference. He's played excellent. Roseanne has been very good all the way through. His defensive game is excellent. He's one of our best penalty killers. And he's created volumes of chances, 4 or 5 high-quality chances a game. Sometimes they just don't go in, or the plays he makes don't end up going in, right? So I don't think there's been anything different the last 2 games.
The short-handed goal
Yeah.
is mistake or pass into the skates or?
It's passing the skates.
Okay.
Yeah, that's passing the skates. And but I would say that's one Levi's got to have. That went in the middle of the net. He's been very good for us. I thought he was solid for us tonight. I thought Beersy played that very well, and we had a back checker coming. And at the end of the day, that was it's a wrist shot from the top of the circles. So you don't want to give it up.
Did it hit the stick of the D or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe it did. But we can't give that up. But normally, with how good Devin is, I would expect that save, unless it skipped, and it might have.
Lee gets the points tonight. How did you feel about his play in this return?
I thought he was strong. I thought he was competitive. He was on the puck. He fought for the puck. He made a really good defensive play to create the turnover to send Roseanne in. Hit the post in the second period of the power play. That would have been a big moment to put that in. Maybe that was the first. I don't know. But I liked his game coming back tonight.
Another line that I was kind of looking at pregame, the Slager-Warren line. How do you feel they played tonight?
They give us good energy, right? All 3 of them play fast, are competitive, they forecheck well, and they give you good energy in the offensive zone.
The play on Proud in the corner, where there wasn't a penalty, is kind of a can opener?
Yeah, it's not kind of a can opener, it's a can opener. But, I mean, listen, the power plays were 4-1 in our favor or whatever it was tonight, so the refs had nothing to do with that loss.
But they did score, right?
They did score. It was a big play. It was a big play because he was banged up, and then that puck doesn't go in the net if he's back defending and back into the pitcher. And obviously that was a turning point in the game. And then they got a fluky power play goal, right? It just bounced in off of Finley's chest. So their first 2 goals to get back in it are a little bit fortuitous. Credit to them for earning those bounces, but and then you're in the third period in a one tie game with 10 minutes to go, and then at that point anything can happen.
That kid line, Yuri, Isaac, and Victor, just what did you put together? What did you think?
I thought they did some good things. I thought they were dangerous at times. I think it's against a team like this, they need to come up with more pucks. And that's something that I think Rosie and Cooley have got a lot better at, and Victor is getting better at it, but this is a heavy team, and it's hard to come up with enough pucks to keep you on offense sometimes. Why? I mean, we didn't have a lot of options today with the guys we had out. I mean, you're talking, Kisakov, Yapst, Kozak, Jost. Pretty good crew out of the lineup today. I think I'd like to, when Cozy's healthy, get Cozy with those guys, whether he's at center or wing. Cozy's such a good forechecker and wins puck battles at such an exceptional clip that he puts his line in offensive situations a lot. So, and those 3 are all also extremely close friends, and so that's something that maybe in the future we'll be able to take a look at.
Jost is out.
Jost is up with Buffalo.
Sorry.
Yapst is sick. Clegg is sick. Kozak's out. With an injury. I don't know if we'll see him this week or not. Yeah.
And welcome back into the studio. I'm Aiden Locke. Alongside me, my co-host, Liam Hoffmann. You're listening to the Flower City Sports Podcast. You just heard from Seth Appert after that game against the Syracuse Crunch. Now, looking ahead, we're going to kind of, preview this Belleville doubleheader on the road this weekend before we get out of here. 2 games, Friday and Saturday on March 1st and 2nd against these Belleville Senators. We look back to just last week, 2 games against them. Wednesday night was a 4-1 loss in Blue Cross. Friday night, 2-1 shootout loss. We talked about that Friday game already. That Wednesday game we talked about on last week's show. So if you want a little bit more in-depth analysis of that 4-1 loss, I recommend checking out Spotify, going to see that game from last week. But Liam, what are the stakes looking like for these 2 games?
They just have to. The offense has to be better. I mean, you just look at this recent stretch: 2 goals scored, 1, 1, 1, 3, and then before that against Wilkes-Barre was 5, which was February 16th. But I mean, that's just 6 games in a row where you aren't able to score. 1 game with 3 goals and 5 games where you can't score 3 goals. That's just not the level that what we came into the year thinking a playoff team coming off of last year should be a playoff team. That's just not good enough. Yuri Kulich, we mentioned, returned from injury, had an assist last night. We saw Isak Rosén score a goal. So encouraging.
Oh, by the way, that goal was something else. Yuri Kulich just being a freight train, just taking a see puck, my puck kind of mentality for Yuri Kulich on that goal. Just skated through a defender, took the puck, a little tap to Rosén, who took it and was essentially a breakaway at that point. He went forehand, backhand, forehand, and roofed it.
Yeah, I hope that we see the Amerks score. I'd love to see in this Belleville weekend, in each game, I'd love the Amerks to score a goal in every period, because we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that since that Wilkes-Barre game. I
think, with Yuri Kulich getting a point last night, and he had a couple really good looks on the power play and just throughout the night. By the way, the power play went 0 for 5 against Syracuse, which you heard.
Which is so much of the issue with the offense. I should have prefaced with that.
Yeah, Seth Happer talked about it a little bit, and a lot of that. He liked the way that line played, so he had a couple really good looks on the power play. That's I believe it was their second or third power play. He got set up for like 3 one-timers in one sequence, and he hit the post a couple of times on Wednesday night. So I feel like he's getting real close to getting back going on that goal scoring run that he was at the beginning of the year, because he's had 1 goal since coming back from the World Juniors, just 1. But granted, he did just miss 5 games, so you like to see how physical he played last night and getting a point in his return. It's a positive sign for what could potentially be to come. But I want to transition. Look at these standings. If Rochester can find a way to win both of these games, get those 4 points, that would bring them a point ahead of Belleville. Hypothetically, that could make them jump from 5th to 3rd. Granted, the results pending with Toronto over the weekend and if they're able to get wins or not. Toronto with just a 1-point lead with 57. Rochester has 56. Belleville sitting on 59, and the Cleveland Monsters have a nice little bit of comfort from 3 and down with a 9-point gap, sitting at the top with 68 points. Syracuse right on their tails, though, with 63. So some really, really big games coming up for all these teams. The North Division really as close as it gets. So
truly. There's Utica in 7th place, has 49 points.
Which is last in the division, if you did not know.
Yeah, sorry. And that's the most of any last place team across the AHL by 6 points. So it just goes to show how tight this race is.
Listen, the Atlantic is in a similar boat from 4 to 7 too, with Lehigh Valley with 51, Hartford in 4th with 59, but Bridgeport only 39 points, so they're having a rough year in 8th there. So yeah, I think nothing but important games down the stretch. The season is looking eerily familiar to last season in terms of this time of year. Some of the similar struggles, though I feel like it's extending a little bit further out than it did a year ago. Mm-hmm. So just they got to get the ship turned around, at least offensively, because they would either get really good offensive play and then not as good defensive play. Rather, that's down to poor goaltending, just poor defensive play in general. And now it's flipped. They're getting pretty solid defensive play night in, night out, really aside from the Syracuse game on Wednesday. But now they just can't find the back of the net. And granted, this has been one of the most, teams that have gone through a lot of change throughout the year in terms of who's in and out of the lineup any given night. And it's part of that reason as to why this has been such a streaky team pretty much everywhere statistically. As we've seen, the penalty kill has been a lot better lately. Only took 1 penalty, and Syracuse had scored on it Wednesday night, so kind of aside from that. And at the beginning of the year, the power play was really good, penalty kill was weak. Now it's penalty kill is solid, power play is weak.
Terrible.
It's just crazy
terrible.
how I don't even know. I can't even describe it right now.
Every week on this show, not every week maybe, but from 2 weeks to the next week, like, we have a different tone and a different feeling about this team, and so I think they could just push that away and, have us with smiley faces if they just start scoring some more goals.
Yeah, that's been the number one issue lately. Seth talked about it in the presser from Wednesday night. But do you have any closing remarks here before we wrap things up?
Nope, I'm good, Aiden. It's been a good, fun first week on camera.
Yeah, that'll do it for us. Your host, Aiden Locke. With me, my co-host, Liam Hoffmann. You've been listening to the Flower City Sports Podcast on 89.1 The Point.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Flower City Sports. To listen to this or any other episodes, check out our Spotify at 89.1 The Point. And tune in next Thursday for Flower City Sports.